Hi, everyone. This is part 3 of the lecture series on the book My Dark Vanessa. If you have not listened to part 1 and 2, I really recommend that you go back and do so. If you are just searching for things about the book, still recommend looking at parts 1 and 2. If you're in my class and you found that part 1 and 2 were maybe too triggering for you, you do have a different book that you can switch to at any point in your reading of this one, because as I said in my previous lectures, it's a very difficult book sometimes to read, and we do have trigger warnings here of abuse, sexual exploitation, and rape. And we are going to talk about some of those things. So in my first lecture, I talked about the book as a whole. We did a little bit of an overview. We talked about the narration, the narrative structure, and some symbols and themes. In the second lecture, we talked in particular about the novel Lolita, and we talked about the intertextuality that that book has with this one. So to recap, an allusion is a brief but purposeful reference to something, a person, place, event, work of literature, song, etc. Usually these are dropped in a subtle way. They're not commented on any further. As an example, I don't have this in the presentation, but we have a dropped reference, an allusion to the show Twin Peaks, where Vanessa says she's flipping the channels and who killed Laura Palmer. That allusion is to this show Twin Peaks that was on in the 1990s that featured the murder of a young girl who it turned out later had been abused by several individuals who were men who were older than she was. So it's an allusion, but there's no further comment on it. It's just that one sentence and we never hear about it again. Intertextuality, in contrast, refers to a specific type of an allusion where there's a deeper relationship between the two texts. So the first text, the book that you're reading, in this case, My Dark Vanessa, may borrow or share ideas, themes, quotations, etc. to comment on the second text or to create a new meaning from it. So we talked before about the book Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, which holds a particular significance, and many have read My Dark Vanessa as an inverted telling of Lolita, where the victim is basically finally able to tell her version of events. So instead of Humbert and the really warped way that he's viewing this girl, we get what happened from the girl's perspective, the person who, although she doesn't want to be called a victim through much of the book, really is a victim through much of a book. So, besides the novel Lolita, there are other Lolita kind of representations in the novel My Dark Vanessa. Vanessa becomes with these kind of nymphette types she sees in the culture around her, which really does show that this abuse is not happening in isolation, that this is something that is part of the culture, and the culture kind of facilitates Strain's actions. So we have a number of allusions to people like Britney Spears, who was hypersexualized in music videos and in the media. This is a picture of Britney about the time she's Vanessa's age, around 15, maybe 16. And this is a picture of her that same year. Yeah, I like these two pictures because you can see kind of like the real Britney being dorky and nerdy and a silly 15-year-old versus how she is being filmed with a filter, with very skimpy pajamas, in a hammock, again in a way that is looking at her through what is often called in literature and film the male gaze, which means that we have a girl or a woman being looked at through a male perspective, and that is limiting seeing her as a whole, complete person, and instead looking at her as only a sex object. So we also have reference to the movie Pretty Baby, which starred Brooke Shields from the 1980s, a story about a 12-year-old girl who's raised in a brothel. In the movie, her virginity is sold. She's sexually exploited. I don't know why I put is sexual exploitation. She is sexually exploited and forced into prostitution by her mother, who was also a prostitute. Now, the movie was controversial at the time, but it did get made, it did get produced, and it is, in My Dark Vanessa, part of her abuse. She watches it with her abuser. We also have references to other inappropriate relationships involving younger women and older men, such as two people dressed as Monica and Bill at a Halloween party. That's a reference to relationship between Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton while he was the president of the United States. And for some of you watching this, you might be like, why are you explaining this? But I have students who are younger. So Lewinsky was an intern. He was a much more powerful, much older man. Most of the blame was placed on her for their affair. And I recommend watching her TED Talk because she talks about that and how it affected her. And not that she doesn't take responsibility for her role in it, but also she was, I think, 20 at the time, maybe 21, and he was the president of the United States, and she was an unpaid intern. So though there are some references like that as well. Again, trying to kind of show that this is in the culture. Poetry. Strain gives Vanessa a number of poems during the grooming process and at various times during their relationship. Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, Edna St. Vincent Millay. And the choices of poetry is kind of like tests, again, pushing her boundaries. So Emily Dickinson has some poems that are very innocuous, right? And then as they go along, he starts saying, you're special, you're different, you understand things that other girls don't, you can handle this type of literature, I know that you relate to it, this reminded me of you, all of that kind of nonsense. Daddy by Sylvia Plath is mentioned in particular. That has themes of trauma and power dynamics. The speaker addresses her deceased father, comparing him to a controlling Nazi from whom she had to break free. We do have a scene, quite disturbing scene, in which Strain requests that Vanessa call him daddy, and that's not too far off from when he gives her this poem. So the comparison is really direct there. We also have another Nabokov work. So Nabokov is the author of Lolita. He also had another book that was written in like an epic poem, basically. And this poem refers to the Vanessa Atalanta butterfly. And when Strain gives this to Vanessa, she sees it as like a sign. Their love is meant to be. She really overanalyzes it. She looks for the meaning in every single word. And of course, this is the poem from which the title of the novel is taken. So this is from the book Pale Fire, and I just wanted to show you a little bit of a longer excerpt. Come and be worshipped. Come and be caressed, my dark Vanessa, crimson barred, my blessed, my admirable butterfly. Explain, how could you, in the gloam of Lilac Lane, have let uncouth, hysterical John Shade blubber your face and ear and shoulder blade? We have been married 40 years. At least 4,000 times your pillow has been creased by our two heads. A dark Vanessa with a crimson band wheels in the low sun, settles on the sand, and shows its ink blue wingtips flecked with white. So, this is the butterfly. Do a little zoom in there, where we see the watermark on the photo that I grabbed. Referring a little bit to Vanessa as a butterfly, something who is delicate, who could fly away at any moment, who is free. How could you have let, we get here, some words that come to Vanessa: uncouth, hysterical, blubbering man, and she in contrast, is admirable. A butterfly. She's coming to be worshipped. She's coming to be caressed. And this is how Strain is trying to portray their relationship. That that vulnerable narcissism that I talked about in the first lecture is in full force here. Like, honestly, she's worshipped and she's caressed and she's admirable and she's a delicate, special butterfly, and he's uncouth and hysterical and blubbering, and she has the power and he doesn't, and she could ruin him, and she's been sent there to tempt him and be a seductress. I mean, it's so nonsensical when you really think about what this guy is trying to do with this poem, and it's I'm sorry, I'm getting very impassioned, but it's manipulative BS. And I'm getting impassioned because I have seen people do this over and over and over again. I saw this happen to people I knew in high school. I have heard about this from people that I knew as adults who, described this exact kind of pattern going on. I also saw it. I'm a college professor. I have not seen it, thankfully, at the school that I'm at now, but I have seen it at other places where I've worked, and thankfully, it came out and those people were dealt with, which, not to spoil the novel, but there are things that happen there that should not have, and Vanessa gets blamed for a lot. In part because she's buying into this narrative, right? That that she's this object of affection, and that she's kind of, in many ways, the one to blame. So that kind of ties into some of the musical allusions. While Strain gives her this poetry that she overanalyzes and obsesses over, she gives him music, lyrics, and sometimes songs to listen to that he basically ignores. And sometimes makes fun of for her even listening to. So in particular, she talks about relating to Fiona Apple, the song in the music video, Criminal. In the video, Apple arrives on the floor. She undresses to her underwear. Sometimes she's wearing pigtails. We see a number of other limbs on the ground from people who are also lying there in various states of undress. There are also snapshots to stuffed animals, again, trying to imply that this is a younger girl. She's 19, Fiona Apple was, but really deliberately made to look younger, curled in up on herself, trying to make her look vulnerable. And Vanessa thinks about the imagery of this video at several points. So this is not just a dropped-in reference, but really a longer intertextual situation. So there we have a screenshot from the video. Okay, so to read these, I tried to kind of put them together more like sentences so you could see without the music what the words actually are saying. I've been a bad, bad girl. I've been careless with a delicate man. And it's a sad, sad world when a girl will break a boy just because she can. Don't you tell me to deny it. I've done wrong, and I want to suffer for my sins. I've come to you because I need guidance to be true, and I just don't know where I can begin. What I need is a good defense because I'm feeling like a criminal. And I need to be redeemed to the one I've sinned against because he's all I ever knew of love. So again, how is Vanessa seeing herself? A bad girl who's careless. In contrast, he's a delicate man. And at various times, Strain says to her, like, you know what you're capable of. Be a good girl. Don't be a bad girl. That kind of thing. She needs to suffer for her sins. She needs guidance. She needs a good defense because she's like a criminal. She needs to be redeemed. Again, she's the one sinning, right? Suffering for her sins, doing the sinning, and that this is love, and that somehow she has broken him. The difference is that he's not a boy and that she's not being bad. But at 15 in particular, she doesn't see things that way. But you can see again here, right, the imagery of the closet curled up into herself, very, very thin, with pigtails, made to look younger than she actually is. So it's from the album cover. For a long time, at the beginning of the novel, again, she feels like she should apologize to Strain. He's the delicate man. She needs to be redeemed. And this is particularly true of scenes in which she lies and covers his crimes, even when that means losing friends, family, and pieces of herself. She really goes above and beyond to protect this man. And other times, she feels very powerful. She reminds herself that her sexuality is a type of power. She does have the power to talk and destroy him if she chooses. And so this is where, again, I mentioned this before in the first lecture, that Vanessa is not, a victim the way that we think that victims should think and feel and behave. She does see her sexuality as a type of power many times, even when she's younger. And in this case, again, he dismisses her musical choices, and he really wants to just see her in that male gaze, the way that he's fashioned her to become this fantasy. And it's symbolic of the way that she struggles to form an identity outside of the one he's created for her. Now, as an adult, I love these pictures of Fiona Apple as an adult. Both the one where she's at the awards and the one where she's like really putting the emotion into the music. Fiona Apple has said that she was raped at the age of 12. I think this is kind of important because the thinness does play a role in the novel as well. Her thinness and disordered eating was part of her attempt to get rid of the bait that was attached to my body. A lot of it came from the self-loathing that came from being raped at the point of developing my voluptuousness. So she has also said that the song Criminal was not about that rape, but about guilt over using or taking control of her sexuality, sometimes to get what she wants, power, control, etc. I would say that it might not be tied to it directly. It seems, from an outsider's perspective and the reader response criticism, which is often different from what the author intends, right? So just to say that, my interpretation of the song has always kind of been that if the assault did happen, that yes, there might be, in trying to take back your sexuality, some guilt over that, and a feeling of shame or guilt or feeling like you've sinned if you are trying to kind of reclaim what was taken from you. But at any rate, later in the novel, Vanessa learns of Apple's assault. So she reads this article where the singer is talking about these things. And she realizes that even though this incident was traumatic, Apple refused to let that violation define her or limit her. And in that sense, Vanessa kind of realizes, but it is defining and limiting me in many ways. So she becomes a little bit obsessed with Fiona Apple and her music and her other songs. But this is one of the things that allows Vanessa to reclaim the music of her youth as something that's her own, right? Something outside of the relationship that she formed with her teacher and the abuse that took place. Then we have some allusions to Shakespeare. Now, these come a bit later, but I do think that they're quite important. We have Henry Plow, the other English teacher, who Vanessa takes classes from as a college student. The plays that she's studying are really not as important as how she interprets them. So, for example, she tells her teacher she wants to do her Shakespeare project on Lolita and how there are Shakespearean ties to the book Lolita. She says that she sees shades of Lolita in the historical drama Henry IV, which to me is a stretch. In the tragedy Titus Andronicus, Vanessa compares the rape of Lavinia, who has her hands and tongue mutilated, to Lolita, because Lavinia is unable to really say who did this to her. In Othello, which this is a picture from the film version, she compares Desdemona's strawberry spotted handkerchief to Lolita's strawberry print pajamas that Humbert Humbert has given her. Except that Dolores was never given strawberry print pajamas. These were actually given to Vanessa by Strain as part of his grooming process. So again, showing that intertextuality, that she has read that book so many times, she really put herself in the place of Lolita and conflates real life with fiction. But again, as you read, I'd really like you to think, I love that picture. I'd really like you to think about these allusions, these intertextual references. Consider the way in which the references indicate how much our culture is permeated with images of hypersexualized young girls and how they're often seen only through that male gaze or male perspective. How this culture is responsible in part for facilitating Strain's abuse of Vanessa, and how Vanessa reads the poems, songs, and books, and the way in which she reads herself into these works. How do she and Strain interpret or misinterpret the poems and the novels? And how do they also play a part in Vanessa's vital coming of age process, which kind of is arrested when she's 15. It kind of stops. And at 32, she kind of begins to come to a place where she's able to grow up and she's able to finally come of age in a more authentic way and really find herself and develop her identity. So as you read, consider all of that. I hope that this helped you understand the book a little bit more and the references that the book made. Thanks, everybody.